Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you everyone for coming. Tonight's session will be dealing with talking about the various paths towards Allah. And our esteemed speakers tonight will be talking about their own experiences in dealing men upon their own individual paths. And inshallah, this session will be a very beneficial one for all of us in attendance tonight, inshallah. So, without further ado, we will give the mic to our speakers. Sorry. So basically, some of the questions that we'll be asking tonight will be involved with the kinds of people that you've met in your path and their characters, and what about their experiences that had struck you, that put you in such a amazed state. So, like, basically, if you could start by talking about the various kinds of people that were on the path to Allah throughout your life, and what about their Islam, what about their character, what about their experiences that had struck you so much, that inspired you, and whether there were examples from our own Islamic history of these kinds of people, and basically the more recent examples they encountered. Okay, without further ado, we'll pass the mic to Sidi Harun.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can everyone hear? You can't hear? Can you hear now? Now? Okay. Okay. In case you didn't hear the question, I was asked to talk about people that I've met along the way who've influenced me in some way, what similarities there were and what their character was. And I entered Islam in 1972 and immediately was initiated into a tariqa or a Sufi order. So my experience has been through that filter exclusively. Some other people have gone through different, forms of Islam, Salafi forms, different, experiences. But my experience has been solely among people of tasawwuf. And the people that influenced me the most, were the awliya that I met initially in Maghrib and then ultimately in other places. And what characterized these people was their beautiful, beautiful behavior and their character and their illumination, their luminousness. And I tried to describe this in the book that I wrote called Signs on the Horizons, to let people know that these kinds of people do exist. But what I would say is also, in your own experience, you could have had a profound experience with your parents, for example, or an uncle, or the friend of the family, or someone who has a deep, you could say, belief in Allah and a deep illumination. So it's not, it isn't. I think the theme of this evening is the various paths to Allah. Everybody has some extraordinary story, really, particularly on the way to belief. Before I became a Muslim, I had all kinds of experiences that led me toward Islam, and they weren't religious experiences at all. They weren't even remotely religious. They were more to do with what I was doing at that time. But then once within Islam, the turning point for me was really meeting people of wilaya, people who were luminous. And the first person I met like that was a man named Muri Abul Qasim. He was a murid of Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Habib. And this was in 1972. And he was sitting in a circle, and his head was lowered, and people were greeting everyone in the circle. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, people, I have to be right. No, this is fine. This is fine, but I just have to be very close. and I was going around the circle, and I didn't know anything. I had no idea of the adab or anything. I was just imitating people, going around the circle, kissing each of the members of the assembly's hands. And I came to this man, and his head was bowed, and when he looked up at me, I almost fainted. Seriously, I mean, I almost lost my consciousness. He was so luminous. And he was the first person I recognized as a saint, as a wali Allah. And so this had it made a huge impression on me. And I used to sit next to him whenever I could, just because I was so. And there were other experiences I had. There was a great scholar in Morocco whose name was Sifudul al-Hawari. And we'd met him, and I remember sitting in a majlis, and he was giving a durs about wudu, about how to do wudu. It was very dry, it sounded very dry. People were shrieking, fainting, and weeping all around me. I didn't understand any Arabic at the time, but it was phenomenal. And he was just speaking very quietly and everything. People were crying and fainting, and he had this huge impact on people. But he seemed very sort of sober and sedate. And then later on, we were walking up one of the steep hills in Fez, and I saw this brilliant light from a distance. Incredible light, and I thought, what is that? And it was moving, and when it got closer, I realized it was a person, and I thought, who is that person? It was unbelievable. It was a piercing light, and when the light got close, I realized it was Sifudul, and he stopped and he shook everyone's hand and went on. But you have experiences like that. But what really leaves an impression is the behavior of these people. And for me, the two most influential people that I had a long relationship with were Sayyid Omar Abdullah, Muini Baraka, who was from Hadrami extraction, but from Zanzibar, from East Africa, and Habib Ahmed Mashhur Al-Haddad. And these men changed me completely by being in their presence. And the thing that characterized both of them in very different ways was extreme humility. An extreme humility. When I would come in to see Habib Ahmed, he would get up, and he had a damaged leg, he had a game leg. And he would get up and he'd go, Allah, 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 Harun, Harun, Allah, 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 Allah. Every time I would come, I was nobody. I was an idiot. But he gave me this kind of beautiful greeting every time. He had the most beautiful, he was luminous and beautiful. And he had such beautiful character, and he was kind, and he was sweet. And I remember people would come to him, and they would kind of, what I would call, dump on him. People would say, I have this problem, I'm changing my flat, I'm doing this, what should I do? And these are things you're not supposed to take to a Sheikh Murabbi. You're supposed to, this is something, he's wasting his time. And I was thinking, he was in the next room, and I was with Sayyid Omar, and I said, I don't know how Habib can stand being around someone like me. And Sayyid Omar turned to me and he said, Habib only wants to be alive because of someone like you. He said, otherwise he'd rather be with his Lord, with Rabbana. So this is how these people are. And they change you. And so I've been lucky because on the path, I've had these experiences with great awliya. And they're all very similar, and when they meet, they recognize one another. So there isn't some sort of competition. It's like my sheikh is better than your sheikh or something like that. They're all, I took Sayyid Omar Abdullah to the Haram to meet a sheikh that I would sit with, and I had some doubts about him. He was a Sudanese sheikh, Idrisi sheikh. And Sayyid Omar, as he walked toward the sheikh looked at him and he went, Abshir, Abshir, Abshir. And they sat down together and they talked. And after they talked for a while, we walked across the mataf. And I turned to Sayyid Omar, I said, what did you think? He went, he's wasil. He's so advanced, he can play. He recognized him. And this is what happens. They recognized each other. And it's a very beautiful thing when you have contact with people on the way who are pure like that. And we're lucky. We're lucky. Anyway, I'll turn the mic over.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad miftah babi rahmatillah adada ma fi ilmillah salatu wa salaman da'iman bidawa mulkillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa mawala. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli amma ba'du. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Sidi Haruna Habib, Alwi Abu Futim, my respected brothers, elders and sisters, Alhamdulillah, I'm grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable me to be with you today, Alhamdulillah. In order for me to tell my own bit of the stories, I have first of all need to make a disclaimer. I'm not an Islamic scholar, but in fact I'm only a servant of Allah. I work as a doctor, I'm a neurosurgeon. I've been practicing medicine for a number of years now. I spent almost 28 years of my life in the UK. So Alhamdulillah, to me that's certainly one of the greatest blessings Allah has bestowed upon me and my children who were all born in the UK. And we Alhamdulillah came back to Malaysia 4 years ago. During these 28 years I've met many people. Not all of them are wali Allah, but there's certainly few people who really stick out in my mind. One of them is a close friend of mine. It wasn't close initially, but ended up being a very close friend of mine. To put things into perspective, I need to tell you the story and a bit of background what happened during that period. In 2000, this is after 13 years being in the UK, I got myself into trouble. In the sense that this is during after I got married, it's a year down the line. My wife, my beloved wife Munira, was about 32 weeks pregnant. I was preparing for my exams, and I was also looking for a job. And one day, lo and behold, because I was asked to go to the immigration office to renew my visa, my stay in the UK, I was told, initially I thought, 13 years in Europe, I shouldn't get into trouble. But this is my first trial in the UK. All of a sudden, because during that period, I was also asked to prepare for my research. Went there, nothing to be expected, and suddenly, to cut the story short, I was asked to leave the country. So this is something like, my wife is 32 weeks pregnant. She's no longer able to fly. I don't have any job to go to. And then I was asked to leave the country. So I thought, how could this happen to me? But that very moment, I remember the ayah, Inna ma'al usri yusra, fa inna ma'al usri yusra, every tribulation there's an ease. And lo behold, every tribulation there's an ease. So it was a difficult time for me because I could not, the way I felt it, I could not move forward, I could not turn to the left, right, and back. But the only thing I could ask for was Allah's help. And so it was a difficult moment for me. Because I don't know what to do, because I didn't have any money, because without any visa, I was given essentially I was asked to leave the country with the right of appeal. So normally, if you're asked to leave a country, you can seek a solicitor's help, a lawyer's help to stay in the country. But in my position, I could not I could not ask for help. So during this difficult period, I met a brother who's also a doctor. So this is about a week down the line. When I met him at my research center, he didn't know who I was. And I said to him, look, I'm in a difficult moment, and could you lend me some money? Yeah. He's a Pakistani chap. I'm Malaysian. I've got no, we've not met before. I don't know what my future going to be. And then I remember him saying to me, how much do you need? How much do you need? And I said to him, whatever you can give. So he said, okay. He wrote me a check, and it was worth £2,500. So nearly 10,000 ringgit. Yeah. So you ask yourself, would you do it to another fellow Muslim you've never met before, whose future is uncertain? So this chap, he said to me, yeah, no, don't worry about it. You just pay me whenever. And I said how he has no fear of his wealth. He was the degree of tawakkul. This is a normal Muslim doctor. There's nothing special about him, obviously, except for his iman and tawakkul to Allah. So, because it took me a bit of time for us to settle our visa problem. It took us nearly a year. And 2-3 months later, after my wife delivered our first child, Khadija, alhamdulillah, everything went well. And during that period as well, alhamdulillah, I got through my exams, obviously with Allah's help. And then that moment, the second moment, I need to ask him for financial help again. I've not settled my first payment, and then again I went to him to seek for second assistance. And I said, yes, I'll write you another check. Another 2,500. I've not settled. So, and then at the end of it, I said, Musawa, his name is Dr. Musawa, what about if I leave, what about if my visa is not approved, and I will have to leave this country without being able to pay back to you? And I said, no, it's okay, don't worry, this is Allah's gift to me, and it's a gift to you. So, that's the and alhamdulillah, at the end of it, I was, Allah, to cut the story short, I was able to regain my visa and complete my payment. But it stands out, throughout the 28 years, there are few people who really embodied what Islam is all about: the trustworthiness, the sincerity of the help. And I'm really touched by these, by these people. They don't necessarily be Muslims, and I must confess that I've learned more about how to behave as a Muslim in a non-Muslim country than in Malaysia currently. Yeah, the traits of the prophets are all of them, unfortunately, and I'm really hoping that some of these good people of mine, are given the hidayah to embrace Islam. Because let me tell you, once you are out of the country, you will appreciate what you actually have within yourself. The hidayah is the priceless gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to all of us. And if some of my friends, really beautiful people, beautiful neighbors, they are not being given this hidayah. And if you could understand what it means, that these people, if they died, they will be, na'udhu billah, will be gathered in hell, na'udhu billah. And then the punishment is forever, and there's no turning back. So, what we hear is not, we have been given a special gift by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I think it's incumbent upon us to spread this love, this gift to other people around us. I think I will stop you there, and I'll tell more stories later on.
Barakallahu feekum for the stories. So, another follow-up question to both of our speakers. So the common theme that ties both stories together was the husn dhan of Allah. For Sidi Harun, it manifested through his encounters with the people on the path, with the awliya. Whereas for Dr. Abdullah, it was husn dhan of Allah had manifested through the humility that had been embodied within the challenges that he faced. So my question is now, how has this husn al-dhan of Allah manifested throughout both of your lives time and again as you encounter other people, and how has that contributed to your own spiritual development and your understanding of the deen, and how has that affected perhaps your da'wah to other people that you've encountered?
This reminds me of something I heard from Sheikh Hamza Yusuf recently when I was visiting him. And he told me of when he was young, he went to Morocco, and he was with one of the awliya, one of the shuyukh, in a circle of young students. And the sheikh asked each student what he aspired to, what he wanted. And the students were coming up with all these different things. I want knowledge of God, I want, this, I want that. And Hamza said that he was confused. He didn't know what to, he didn't know what to ask. And finally, when the circle came to him, he just blurted out, he said, I want husnul khatam. And the sheikh said, Naam, like that. He said that he nailed it. It's to have the best thoughts of this world and the next, and to want that. And husn al-dhan is very difficult today. It's very, very, very difficult. And one of the things that Sheikh Muhammad Jilani said is one of the worst things we have today is news. It's very bad, and you don't need to look at most news. I mean, find out if there's a volcano next door or something, but you don't, because news floods into the mind. It's all bad, it's all negative, and it fills you with very bad thinking. So what we need to try to do is turn away from all of that and think the best of Allah. One of the things I realized, in just living life and meeting people, I've had encounters with several very insane people, and one of the things that sort of characterizes a mad person is paranoia. Is they think that the entire universe and everything in it is conspiring against them. This is an attribute of insanity. And then I was thinking about that, and I thought, well, what that means is that a sane person realizes that the entire universe and everything in it is conspiring for them. It's for the whole universe is for you. Allah Arhamar Rahimin. Allah is the most generous of the generous. Allah Razzaq. Allah is everywhere manifest. Allah is with us all the time. Allah is closer to us than our jugular. How could we have a bad opinion about anything? So it's a discipline we have to take on. I once went to a very great Wali Allah in Sidi Muhammad Sahrawi, and I said something. He was 100 years old. I mean, he was over 100 years old, and he was blind. And there was somebody that we both knew who had frankly gone off the path and done something wrong. And I mentioned this to him, and he got very upset. And he said, I don't care. I like him, and anyone who doesn't like him, I don't like them. And I was very tough with him, even though I was this young idiot, And I said, well, if he represents the way of Allah, then I don't want the way. I don't want anything to do with it. I was very hard on him. He took me close to him. This was a big lesson for me. He said, look, I only want to have a good opinion of Allah. And here I am bringing up some inconsequential, something stupid. It was a big lesson for me. It was terrible what I did. It was bad adab. It was because he's 100 and some years old. He just wants to think well of Allah. He wants to have husn al-dhan. And this is a very high thing. And Sidi Ali al-Mirghadi, who was one of the fuqara of Sheikh Muhammad ibn Habib, he said that husn al-dhan is like you're looking at an oasis. And you see the green, and you see the water, and you see the beauty of it. But if you go closer and closer and closer into it, you start seeing someone beating his donkey, stealing from another person. You start seeing all the bad things. So it's stepping back and looking, having husnul dhan as much as possible. But I think also in this time, stay away from all the news and all this drivel of endless bad, because it affects people. They're very badly affected by it.
One of my teachers, Sheikh Abdulaziz Ahmad Fredericks in Glasgow, used to be asked a question about the existence of God. This is by the non-Muslims. What he did was he simply said, he would tell that particular person, could we just this weekend could we arrange to go to Glencoe? I'm not sure any of you have been to Scotland and been to the mountainous area of Scotland called Glencoe. This is a beautiful area. So what he would do, he'll gather these people who disbelieve in the existence of God, and he would say, once we reach there, just pause a moment, look at your surrounding, the beauty of Glencoe. That would put the inner beauty of Allah within oneself, and you cannot refute the existence of God with the beauty of your surroundings. That's one occasion. And then for me, husnul zan of Allah is all the gracious, all the empowerment, the beauties, the bounties Allah has given all of us. To me especially, I see the beauty from within. I'm not talking about the beauty of the heart. I'm talking about the greatness of the creation of God, i.e. human. Being a doctor, I operate on brains. So I see the intricate beauty, and obviously not many people will get the benefit of this, but once you see the inner beauty, the inner architecture of human body, you'll be amazed how someone could not understand and be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what He's given us. The ability, just even for me to speak to you, our brain is organizing the word, the thought process, and then passing the information to our vocal cords, be able to get it through to you, and my voice will travel along the air and then get to your ears. The eardrum will transmit all the information, interpreted by the brain, and then hopefully you understand what I'm talking about. And then do you question that how could you have any bad thoughts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this simple gift? Do you not see that the ability for you to see me as is the greatness of Allah? Can you not understand the beauty of understanding the words is the greatness of Allah? So I think it's so important for us to be able to ponder. My teacher this afternoon told me, Sheikh Abdullah Jahab said, Afala, to every one of you has a beauty, could you not see it? Afala, sorry, I've got yes, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Within you, do you not see it? Do you not see the beauty? Yeah. So and then the beauty within the humanity. I just like to tell you another story. One day I was traveling to work, and then in Malaysia, once you encounter another car, sometimes you'll chase who will pass through the route if it's a small path. Yeah. I was this is me one day on my way to work. I came across a small path, and then in front of me is a taxi driver. So in Malaysia, sometimes we just try to squeeze through that difficult path. In Aberdeen, this particular taxi driver will stop and signal it to me initially. So he signaled, beam up to me to say, please pass, and I'll beam up to him. So please pass. So we're not getting anywhere. So the most beautiful thing he did to me was this. He would, he leaned forward. Now remember, this is a car in front of you. He would lean forward and he did this to me. Smile at me and did that to me. Do you know that moment essentially signifies the important traits of people around you? How beauty, the akhlaq of these people. Over here, when we pass, we don't even acknowledge the other people who's already given you the passage of way. Over there, not only he acknowledged my presence, he actually did that. So the ihsan, if you talk about ihsan, this is not just a standard, beyond the standard. This is what I see lacking within us. The beauty of ihsan within all of us. I'm sorry, if I just spend a bit, 1 or 2 minutes. When we drive our cars in Malaysia, we have to be careful. This is an important moment for us to behave and to show the beauty of our akhlaq of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Regardless who the other person is, whether it's Chinese, Indian, whatever, sometimes you don't know what will trigger one's action towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I remember there was a story of a bus driver in London who been seeing this chap with a skull cap, a Muslim. Yep. So he said, this chap at 7 o'clock in the morning, he will take my bus. So every day he will pass through. But he seems to be quite a nice gentleman. So one day this chap, the chap walked into his bus and then give him some money. In exchange, the driver gave him excess of what it's supposed to be. It's only 20p. Yeah, 20p, about a ringgit. Yeah, usually it means it's not much, but it's 20p. So initially he didn't realize what was happening, because he normally keep a specific amount of money in his pocket, pass it to the bus driver, and then he'll get the change. So one particular day, this driver, give him the excess money, and then didn't realize until he got back home, then realized there's a 20p extra in the change. So the next morning, he got into the bus and then said to the bus driver, this is your extra 20p. And then the bus driver whispered to him, do you know, sir, I was testing you. I was to see how honest you are. Because of what you did, I'd like to know your religion. Yeah, because obviously he wore a skull cap, and many people will immediately associate skull cap either Jews or Muslims. So immediately attracted to the imam. He is actually imam of a local mosque. And then this imam said that I nearly sold my religion for 20p. Yeah, a small amount of money, but you never know what these people, your small action could trigger a big change on someone's behavior. Alhamdulillah. I probably deviate a bit from the topic.
Barakallahu feekum for this, for the anecdotes. Okay. So, what I see here right now is that from both of your stories, the common theme is that the key to maintaining husn al-dhan of Allah is to behave with adab. When you behave with adab, you glean the hikmah from the situations, because then the situations and the people you encounter in these situations act as mirrors that kind of manifest the hidden side to your personalities, to your characters, to which point then you either decide to ascend to Allah or you descend to your nafs. So with the news being the way it is right now, it inevitably causes one's iman to deteriorate, and even more one's ihsan to be virtually non-existent. So with that being said, how would one go about finding good companionship when seemingly everyone nowadays is out to kind of take every opportunity to be selfish, to assert their power over one another?
Well, I think first of all, companionship is fundamental to any kind of spiritual enhancement or living. You need to have, people confuse companionship with community. So they're talking about the Muslim community or the community of the mosque, or the communities are full of contradictions and problems. But companionship, you could have 2 companions, 3 companions, people that you feel close to. Your companion could be your daughter or your mother or your cousin, someone who is like-minded, who has the same aims as you have. And the test of companionship is longevity. I have companions that I've known for almost 50 years, people that I trust. I love them because I've seen how hard it is to do what we're all trying to do, which is to keep the deen, which is to purify the heart. It's not an easy thing. Nobody's doing it anymore, but it's possible. I was working in Dubai for 15 years, and I went to my sheikh and I said, look, the only problem I have is I'm very isolated because I'm kind of reclusive by nature. And he kind of shook his head. He said, you should beget your company, make them. And that's kind of what it happened. And I began to have people, companions, closer companions. So you can make this. And part of what we've done in the West is you bring people to Islam. Sayyid Omar Abdullah, Muini Baraka, he loved to tell people about Islam. He loved it. He absolutely loved it. He would take every chance he could, and he made things easy for people. The Regent's Park Mosque in London called him in a panic, and they said, "We need you quickly. We don't know what to do." So he went. He came over, and they took him to a Harley Street physician, and he sat with him, and the man said, I've treated many Muslims over the years. I've come to believe that Islam is true and that I should become a Muslim. And so Sayyid Omar said, "Oh, well, that's very good. What's the problem?" He said, "Well, I'm used to every evening I have a glass of sherry, and I've been like that every day for the last 30 years, and I just don't think I can give that up." So then the imams are looking and saying, "You see what we mean?" He said, "Well, what else?" He said, "Well, I just don't think I can pray every day 5 times. I'm very busy. I have many patients. I don't think I can do it." He said, "Okay, is there anything else?" He said, "Well, fasting, forget it. I can't fast." So the imam's going, "You see what I'm telling you? What do we do?" And Sayyid Omar said, "I can introduce you to Muslims who were born Muslim, who were accepted as Muslims, who do and do not do all the things you talked to me, you just told me." He said, "So don't let that stop you. Be a Muslim." And you bring people to Islam. You create your own companions. You can do this, or for those of you who live in a society that's already a Muslim, bring them closer to you, to your way of living, the way of dhikrullah. Introduce people to the beauty of dhikrullah. Build your companions that way, and but it's very important. Suhbah is fundamental to a spiritual path. It's very hard to progress without being, in close proximity to someone. But it doesn't have to be 50 people. It can be 2. It can be 2. And the longer you have these relationships, the more you love these people. And this is what the spiritual path is all about. Is about really falling in love with the belief and with believers and with ultimate and the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I think that question should be directed to Habib Alwi, Abu Futtaim, rather than me. Anyway, we cannot, as human being, we cannot run away from negative thoughts. Sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. It will take the life of us. we all been through difficulties in life. We goes ups and downs, through that, and it's part of trial and tribulations of us being a Muslim, being a human, being a human. These negative thoughts, sometimes you just have to train yourself to think positively about the life around us, the beauty of the people that we encounter every day, the gift of Allah, through our life. And sometimes, I know it can be, we all know that it sometimes can be quite overwhelming. I see negative thoughts like dust, particles. If you look, if you open your Facebook, Instagram, whatever these days, you will see so much negativities and lack of positivities of what's happening around us. And this sometimes can be a killer to our good behavior, our husnul zan to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I see it as dust that will settle on your furniture. If you take your time and effort to clear the dust every day, you've got nothing else better to do, and it will occupy your life. Yeah. So if you do it, you've got nothing else better to do. It will occupy your life. But if you take if you do it once in a while to clean the furniture of the dust, it will look clean. So how do we do that? I think having the good companionship, being in the gathering of something like this, gathering of ilm, of zikr, will empower you to get rid of your negative thoughts of the su'u zan that you would have, and try to force yourself to get rid of all the negative thoughts. It's a training. It's like if you've not done a marathon, you have to do it slowly, in a short distance, and you build it up slowly. Initially, you thought, "Oh, no way, I'm going to run 42 kilometers." The only way you should do it, just do it. Initially 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, and then build it up slowly. So I think that's only the advice I could give. And as I said to you, this particular question should be better directed to Habib Alwi. Thank you.
So my last question before we open up the session to the audience for them to ask questions. So to tie it all together, having good companionship would allow a believer to continuously fall in love with the deen, and therefore increase their iman as they encounter believers who might not externally manifest what we deem as a proper Muslim, but their hearts beautify, become are a testament to their character, and then therefore beautify our own interaction with them. So would that mean that falling in love with Allah and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam through our interaction with the believers that we encounter, does that involve giving up one's own grand designs for what one wants to achieve out of life, and instead allow oneself to be vulnerable, to be always in that state of intimacy with Allah by having that husnul in the first place, having that good opinion of Allah, allowing yourself to be in that state of intimacy, in that vulnerability?
Well, you can and should aspire to do both. We're not living in a time of great asceticism. And, Imam Abdullah Al-Haddad, he said, we're no longer living in the time of the mukarrabun, of the awwaleen, of the early ascetics who did extreme ibadah and self-denial and all of these things that we read about in the books. We're no longer in that age. We're in the age of the people of the right hand. And this is very important to remember. And the shuyukh all recommend that you lead a balanced life, and you take time, you do these, you do these things in a slow and systematic way. I've told this story a few times since I've been here, but Habib Ahmed Mashhoor was approached by one of his very young murids, who I know, who went to him and said, I want you to take me to the goal. I want to go. I insist you please take me to have knowledge of Allah. And Habib said, don't ask for that. And he said, no, I'm demanding. I demand it. I need it. I must have knowledge of Allah. And Habib kept saying, don't ask for that. Finally, he insisted. He said, all right, go to your wife, divorce her, say goodbye to your children, settle your affairs, and come back to me. He said, but I can't do that. He said, then don't ask for it. It's the way today is a way of balance and living in the world, but being aware that the world is passing. The world is passing. Everything passes. We lose everything. And to have that knowledge. One of my friends, Dr. Mustafa Badawi, who's translated many of the books of Imam Al-Haddad and Ahmed Mashhoor Al-Haddad, he's done some wonderful translations. He's a psychiatrist. And I asked him once, what is the major contributor to insanity? I was just curious. And I didn't know what to expect, but what he said really, took me by surprise, and it shouldn't have. He said it's the denial of death. And when you think about it, that's the most insane thing you could possibly entertain, is the denial of death, because it's the only thing we all know that's definitely going to happen to everything, to everyone. So this idea of knowing that the world is passing, and also know that the ego is your enemy. Whether you're in the world or out of the world, the ego is the enemy. You could be living on a mountain and be the most egocentric person on earth, possibly. It's not that you have to give up the world, but you have to give up this idea of the self, and recognize that that's your problem. It's the ego. And the problem today is that we're trained and we're educated to believe that we have to be great, we have to achieve, we have to be amazing, we have to build the ego up. And in fact, it's not true. You can still be a great doctor, you can still be a great engineer, you can still be a great artist, and lose the ego. It's not mutually exclusive. But the more you're engaged in the world, the more you're engaged in things that revolve around the self, the slower your path will to be, unless Allah has chosen you to take you suddenly, by surprise, which happens sometimes, but I wouldn't guarantee it. So I think it's not mutually exclusive. You can do both, and you should want to do both. If you're in the world, you shouldn't say, "Oh well, I'll do this when I'm 70." I'm 70. And trust me, I've been working at this for like a long time, many, many decades, and it takes a lifetime to do these things, and that's the proper way. My Sheikh Sayyid Omar Abdullah, he quoted his own Sheikh, Habib Omar bin Sumayd, who used to say, he said to me what Habib Omar said to him. He said, the later the better. It's better to have spiritual openings later, when you're more mature, than suddenly when you're not ready for them. So keep that in mind. It's a lifetime. We're accustomed to instant nirvana, enlightenment weekends. Everything's fast, speedy. This is not the spiritual path. It's something very gradual. It's something where these things happen over long periods of time, and you shouldn't have someone who expects these things to happen overnight is delusional. They're not. It's not real. So you don't give up either, you know. Make your way in the world, but know that it's passing. And know that your ego, the thing that's building that you think is so important, is not. It's your enemy, in fact.
This life is a journey, the journey that Allah has bestowed and asked upon us. Do you have another microphone? Do you have another microphone? No, that one. I need to use this as an analogy. So imagine this wire. Okay, you can see the metal part of it, and then this wire is quite a long wire. It goes into that room, and also imagine the room. The wire continues on to center of Shah Alam and goes around Kuala Lumpur. The same wire, and then goes around to London. Okay. New York, Paris, back to Shah Alam quite a few times. And our journey in this world is this metal bit. If you look at the metal bit, there are various components of it, the smaller and the bigger component. Some of us will end at the initial part of it. Some of us, a majority of us will be around about 70, 80s, inshallah, and some of us will be longer. And the truth of the matter is, this is the only life Allah has given us. There's no return. It's a one-way ticket forward. Whatever we do in this world is what we're going to reap in the hereafter, be it good or bad. If anything happens to us, if we do well, we'll be successful for forever. If we're not so sure about our afterlife, we'll be punished, and the punishment is forever. And that's the reality of this world. So some of us will so engrossed with this life, they forget that the rest of the wire is there. And they thought, oh yes, I'm going to work really hard until I get to about 50s, then I'm going to retire and enjoy my life. And some of us may not reach to the age of 50. So some of us will fight, to get into positions of influence. Some of us expect to be rich. Some of us would want many large properties. Some of us would want to get many children, and all of these are part and trials and tribulations of Allah has bestowed upon us. And whatever is good, Allah will ask about it. Whatever is bad, Allah will punish us for it. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakumullah khairan kathir. And with that, we've come to the end of the session. And I'd like to thank everyone that's come to the session. And well, inshallah, it was a very enlightening and spiritual uplifting session for all of us. وبالله التوفيق وبالهداية. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.